And welcome back. You're watching this special broadcast coming to you from the Business Bay Square in Isili. The bench is on the road, and in our company, is the Cabinet Secretary for Trade, Lee Kenyanjui. We're talking about investment, the ease of doing business, and how then to iron out the bottlenecks that affect the business community. Waziri, many thanks for staying with us. So we talked about one major factor, which is the cost of power, which leads to production. And we'll talk about manufacturing by extension. And recently, Ethiopia has launched that. Our president was there. He admired it. It will, of course, produce cheap electricity for companies over there. And ideally, how then should we also move forward, given, as you have mentioned, our robust financial systems, the confidence from the investor community, and available labor to work for them? So what needs to happen next then to address that bottleneck?
Yeah. So we have the necessary confidence from the investors, but there are one or two issues that we still need to address. I think the first one is the cost of power, but also to confirm that there is no country that gives you all the ticks, all the boxes are ticked. So you'll find in one country you may have good cost of power, but there's no labor, there's no skilled labor, or there's no political stability. So you have to make an aggregate decision. And within that aggregate decision, Kenya still remains the best ranked in our region. In fact, you will remember that until the other day, Ethiopia was ahead of us. But from a GDP perspective, Kenya is ahead of Ethiopia. But more importantly, we can also learn from Ethiopia's investment in geothermal, in hydropower. And I think this is what really the president was talking about, that we can come up with similar programs that can benefit Kenya and increase our output, our energy output. But also more significantly is that Kenya has sun around the year. So again, we have put tax incentives so that companies can use part solar. We're also working with many of the companies that are coming to put even charging points across our major highways and institutions. So I think from an energy point of view, the moment we reduce the cost of the demand of energy and increase solar and other sources of power, including geothermal, where Kenya is leading in Africa and 7th in the world, then we're going to see some of these outcomes. And some of these programs will be done on a PPP, really. That's really why we're saying the financing model becomes very important in unlocking and moving forward. But I want to confirm that, especially through our special economic zones, our EPZs, and also through our horticulture section, the airport with the highest outbound cargo in the whole of Africa is actually JKL. Because of our horticulture, our flowers, our vegetables and so on, we are doing very well within that space. And this year alone, we had a 20% increase in our export of horticulture. So there's a lot that's happening. We just need to put all the small pieces together, and together we can be able to marshal the gap that has been
and talking
a
about
challenge.
Horticulture, recently when there was the COMESA summit here in Nairobi, there was a special forum that was meant for the local market and the European Union. So talking about the new trade frontiers then, how do we maintain these multinationals who at times decry, one, the quality, and then two, you talk about issues regarding non-tariffs, which they decry, especially within the COMESA setup, in our case, and the other countries that belong to that community. So how do we then target both markets as we ease up the business?
So first, within the horticulture, our real market is actually in the UAE and Europe. And for flowers, we are commanding nearly 40% of the entire Europe. And every day of JKL, we are sending our flowers and vegetables to those markets. Some of the challenges that were cited by the investors was the cost of freight and even availability. So there are times in the past when we have not had enough evacuation capacity for our cargo to other parts of the world. I am happy to note that 2 months ago, through the Ministry of Transport and CS Chirchir, we were able to give more cargo flights to come to Nairobi. And even last month, we added 2 more. So again, that issue has been resolved. Expanding our capacity in terms of the cold storage, we're already working on that. And again, when you look at the private investors who want to come into Kenya, and they want to invest, the cost of finance therefore becomes important. 1 year ago, the cost of finance was about 18, 19. Now with 12-13%, you're able to access finance here. So we have brought all that down. But most significantly is the availability of manpower. If you want to do all this in any other country outside Kenya, you would have to take some of the Kenyans out there. So Kenya is very rich. The young people who have studied horticulture, who have studied agriculture, and all these sort of IT and all those things have made Kenya a very attractive destination. And I think our education, although we spend a lot of money in our education, but you can see the outcomes in terms of manpower. And any investor who wants to come into a country, the first question they want to ask, will I be able to get the right manpower to do that? And for Kenya, is a big yes. And we are working with the institutions also, because we also believe that it is important to align education to the economic needs of a nation, so that the skills that we require are being produced by our universities, harmonization with our universities. And that is already happening at a very high level. So we see a bright future for Kenya, both in the regional market, and you're aware that the president is the chairperson of the COMESA. And this is a 21 country membership with very, 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 very huge potential. So again, using that platform, we want to make trade the currency, you know, because we don't want this situation where every time African countries are going out there, they're going for aid. The right conversation is trade. So that if you allow me to sell my produce outside there in the world, I'll be able to create the jobs that would help me to bring social stability, create employment, and so on. So then with the East African community, the president is also the chairperson. So again, another huge market with impossible potential. And we want to use that platform to make Africa, and East Africa for that matter, the trading ground. Yes.
Then, talking about that, at times the forced relations diplomatically between member states of the community spills over to affect trade, and therefore inhibits the movements of people and goods across the border, which the protocol establishes the East African community for the economic integration. Ideally, then, how should this be addressed first? Second, the question of non-tariff barriers, which also came up during the COMESA summit, in which the president was handed over the chairpersonship from Burundi, which last hosted President Evariste Ndayishimiye. So in that context, how will these bottlenecks be addressed first in the region?
I think the first point to note is that all economic blocs across the whole world, in Asia, in Europe, there will always be small issues between nations. But the point is to appreciate that those issues should not come in the way of trade, and they should be solved in more diplomatic ways. And you recall that recently when Tanzania banned Kenyan traders operating at a certain level, Kenyans wanted us to take a very drastic action in retaliation, and we said that's not the way to solve problems. We realized our potential as a region is very huge. And through diplomacy, we're able to solve a lot of issues. So I think it calls for leadership, for people within the bloc to appreciate that Kenya may have one commodity in excess that is really needed in the next country. For example, a lot of our companies are importing coal from Tanzania. We don't have coal in Kenya, so we're importing it from Tanzania. Then food also, maize and some of this stuff comes from some of those countries across the region. But also the finished products from our industries, many of them are also bought in those countries. So I think it's good to look at the bigger conversation as opposed to the little things that may come in between. And also to confirm that we have made it very clear that the future of East Africa is open borders. If you have a commodity you're producing here, you want to take to Uganda, to Rwanda, to Somalia, then we should open all these. In fact, we're opening some of the border points with Somalia so that goods can travel, whether it's miraa or finished commodities, they can be able to go without much obstacle. So we want to say, if we stop trade, then we're actually preparing to be beggars. And that's not the direction we want to go.
So talking about that, because the issue of import then dovetails our local production and local manufacturing capacity. And here I want to emphasize more on sugar, cement, and maize, especially in the COMESA setup. So what then happens to our local production first?
I think we must agree that we want to protect our industries. For example, we don't import sugar unless we are sure that what you are producing, there is a gap. So through the Kenya Sugar Board, we always have that kind of data that allows us to know we are likely to have this kind of gap, and therefore let's import so that people don't have to queue. But also we need to train our farmers to not only produce but also produce within costs, because even if we protect, we can't protect forever. And if you want to go and sell our produce in Zambia, we can't stop them from bringing here. So I think the point also, and this is really the most critical thing, how do we lower our cost of production? Whether it is in food, whether it's in manufactured goods, so that when our goods reach out there, they can be able to compete without much pushing. So in the initial start, we want to protect our markets. We want to protect our industries, but we must also help them to become competitive, because in the world, the real currency is to be competitive and win under whatever circumstances.
Yeah, and there's also the cost of protectionism, is it?
Yes.
Especially if you look at Europe, the tone in the United Kingdom by the Reform Party and following the Brexit referendum in 2016. Our flowers still go to Europe, and there is Donald Trump. So how then do we navigate these troubled waters, even away from our challenges at the regional level?
So what's happening at the global space, you see there's winter in Europe. You cannot change that. Again, the cost of energy is very high. So for that reason, they may not be able to produce the vegetables. They may not be able to produce the flowers. So for that reason, they need us. You go to the Middle East. If you look at the Middle East, the agriculture situation, the agroecological situation, they cannot be able to feed themselves sustainably. So they need us. So I think for Kenya, and this is really where we have done so well, we have looked at countries that have a strategic deficit that we think we can fit into. And for that reason, Kenya has signed a trading agreement with UAE. A lot of our beef, vegetables and flowers go into that countries, and every day hundreds of Kenyans are actually shipping their avocado or macadamia, and I can say UAE is a very good trading partner with Kenya. And on the other side, we also buy some of their produce, especially petrochemicals and so on, petroleum products. So it's a good sort of trading. When you go to the UK and Europe, the same thing. So even if certain countries may have a certain advantage, they may not be 100% competitive, because if it comes to labor, if you look at Europe, and the cost of labor is very high compared to here. If you look at weather circumstances, the same. If again you look at climatic conditions and what can grow there versus here. So we have, in spite of the challenges around the world, Kenya still has a golden opportunity, not only to transform the regional markets, but also globally. I'm happy to note that 5 years ago, Kenya was nowhere in the avocado production map. Now we are among the fastest growing nations in terms of avocado production. Macadamia, the same. So we want to move to these other crops, diversify, look for better markets, and in terms of opening markets across the world, we are going beyond there. We are currently negotiating with China, because China is a 1.4 billion population. So even if we go to 1%, it can keep us busy around the year. So when the president visited China in April, we agreed that we would want Kenyan goods to access China on duty-free, quota-free. And as a result of that, a team has been sitting, including today, to ensure that now we put action to those directives given by the two presidents. And I want to assure you, by early January next year, we'll be now having more volume going to China.
Yeah, and when you talk about that, and you earlier on talked about imports, and this is having an economic strain, ideally.
Yes.
And I'm sure you understand this from trade perspective, of course, leading that docket. How then, and at what point do we turn our economy to productivity-led, export-oriented economy to balance off even our financial sheets?
Beautiful. Yeah. So we have started what we call the special economic zones. And these are Naivasha, Dongo Kundu, and also we have private ones run by individuals in many of the other sectors. So what do? Is that we want to reduce how long it takes for you to start your industry. So the government has provided the land, subsidized the cost of energy. So we have very many industries that are coming in those two places that we've mentioned. We also have now at a lower level what you're calling CAIPs, county aggregation centers, where we can now bring all our avocado, our macadamia, our fish, our skins and hides for value addition. Because the other bigger problem we are having is that we have always sold our produce as raw or semi-processed. So through value addition, we will improve our values by 3 to 4 times. So again, this is happening. For the KIPES, of the 47 that were to start, about 13, 14 are at the final stages of completion. And I must laud counties like Meru, Kirinyaga, Busia, Bungoma, Uasin Gishu, and many others that are really on the front line. And once they complete, we are now going to have where you can go and buy the macadamia, value add, we have cold storage, so we reduce post-harvest. So all these things we have said over the years about post-harvest are now being addressed at the KIPE level. So I think the missing link in all this conversation is Kenyans to realize that what the government ought to do, we have done. And we continue to do that. Now we need Kenyans to come forward. And if it is milk, start the yogurt, start the cheese. If you're in the area of maybe macadamia and all the others, start now doing the jam and another value added whatever. And just to say, we also have an entity called Kenya Development Corporation, KDC. What is their role? To fund at 10%, 8%, and in fact yesterday we were handing over a check of 500 million to one of the cooperatives so that they can go and on lend to their members for value addition and growth. So in terms of government doing the last mile to facilitate industry, we have done that. But I think more significantly on industry is that on raw materials, the materials you require for you to come and do production here, we have zero rated them. So anything you require to come and do value addition here, then sell it as a finished commodity, we are working on it, and many others. And these are discussions that are very live together with the associations, whether it's Kenya Association of Manufacturers, KEPSA, and all the others. Because they raise issues, our work is to solve them, and now move to the next level.
You also talked about the question of taxation.
Yes.
And the former American ambassador to Kenya, Meg Whitman, appreciated and acknowledged the zigzag taxation regime in our country, on up, on off, unpredictable, is what she decried about. How much effort is going into that, even as we now hear the sector-by-sector hearing of our budget 2026-27, which has started today? How much focus should be given to this to streamline our taxation base?
I personally believe, especially for industry is not a quick investment. You don't go to industry when you want to be there for 2 years. So it's a 20-year, you need a horizon. So if you're producing a commodity whose taxation changes every day, you cannot even budget your costs. So there is a high need both for Parliament and also the Senate to realize that one of the biggest hindrance in terms of growth is just that predictable environment. So if this is a VAT, it remains constant for a reasonable period of time. If it's tax on any commodity, the same. But I think also we must go back to the Constitution and say that really the power to change taxation laws is with the Parliament. So, and we must respect that. But I think even while upholding the Constitution, if we agreed that there should be better consultation, there should be better stability in terms of some of these things, and also looking at the impact on the economy, then we'll be able to go far. But I believe a healthy conversation has already begun. Though we may not have the immediate outcomes now, but we believe that unless there's a real compelling need for us to change any tax item, we should not be doing that every year, because it creates an uncertain environment for investors.
Yeah, and that uncertain environment is what manufacturers are concerned about.
Absolutely.
Then you have a consistent manufacturing base, you create more employment, and you have more people to tax and pull them into the tax bracket.
So, but also significantly, some of these requests and demands also come from the same industry. So today, this industry comes and say, we don't want this, we don't want this, so sometimes we put them. So we're also trying to tell them, can we try and live with whatever tax measures we provide for a bit longer? Because the truth is 80% of the tax changes also come from the same private sector. So I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg. They may also complain, but much of it also comes from the same industry.
Then talking about that, how much focus then should we give in that particular area from, of course, state and non-state actors' perspective? For more people to be absorbed, of course, appreciating the millions who are graduating from our universities and largely rely on the government employment, the white-collar jobs, but that is untenable. Then how much coordination and teamwork is required on that other front to absorb them, but first by creating the conducive environments that we have talked about?
Thank you. So I must say that there are certain fundamental policy shifts that we are working on. I just want to say maybe one or two.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Recently, you had the president say that we don't want to be importing our furniture. So we have timber both in private land and government land, but you continue to import furniture worth maybe the whole year, maybe about 900 million. So if that 900 million was channeled to industry, this whole area of Nairobi, Machakos, Nakuru, all these places, you will see industries coming up. Not only will we be able to absorb that 900 million,
Billion
we'll
or
also
million?
Million.
Million. Okay.
Yeah, imports.
Yeah.
We'll also be able to sell to our regional markets. So what you're buying from Malaysia and other countries, why can't we produce it here? Secondly, we have also talked about the pharmaceuticals. Kenya imports nearly 80% of its pharmaceuticals. So these pharmaceuticals that we are importing, yes, some of them may be on patent, some of them you cannot just bring them here, but what other countries have done is you bring what you call the active ingredients. Then you come and do the formulation here, which means you use the local glass, you will use the bottles, you use the branding here, you use the labor here. But on a typical, maybe antibiotic, you'll find that the active ingredient is like 5%.
Yeah.
Maybe the 95% is actually water. So we also need to rejig that and look at how we can be able to part manufacture here. And more importantly also, government is putting aside funds to facilitate companies and individuals who may want to start in that area. In the outer policy, we have about 13 billion shillings, which is part of what the president negotiated when he went to China for the TCAT, to avail funds for individuals and companies that may want and are already involved in the auto industry. What is the auto industry? Tire manufacture, you manufacture exhaust, you manufacture seats for the car, you manufacture side mirror, radio and all those things. So that when you're importing a vehicle, we can say vehicles that have a local input are going to get less tax. So that's an incentive, and the government is already giving funding, long-term funding, for us to develop the auto industry. And these are some of the industries that we hope will be domiciled in our special economic zones.
Yeah.
So there's a synchronized effort from government, through Treasury, ourselves in industry, and also our external partners, so that also we can harmonize and attract the auto industry as a key player in Kenya.
Yeah, and let's also shift our attention to the continent, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area.
Correct.
And there was AGOA, of course the deadline, and the second coming of Donald Trump. And the tariffs regime by the American president affected all countries. It's a case of protectionism. What is the mechanism at your disposal as a country to navigate this, given the importance Washington plays in Kenya's economy?
So obviously Washington is a critical trade partner with Kenya, and we continue to maintain very healthy relations. But as you can imagine, AGOA is not a Kenya-US conversation. It's a continent-wide conversation. And for that matter, as long as the bilateral conversations start, Kenya would want to be part of that. But we are also engaging the US at a Kenya-US level, because we also believe that beyond just being a trading partner, we also have other strategic relations with the US. And all indications are that we are having a favorable hearing, and we believe that in the coming months we'll be able to have some good outcome. But what are we doing in the meantime? Is also to explore other markets, both within Africa, therefore you talk about the Africa Free Trade area. We're also thinking about Europe. So again, we have been in discussions with these textile manufacturers to also look for alternative markets. And even within Kenya, we're also having a live conversation around how we can also source part of our clothing from here in Kenya. And I think these are discussions that will help us both create employment and also save on forex. You may be aware that Rivertex has been a parastatal for many years, but we have leased it to a private player who is a big cotton and textile player in West Africa, and is bringing both the expertise and the capital. And very soon we are going to increase our uptake and growth of cotton, and again the whole textile ecosystem will be put back to life.
Yeah, and is visa regime across the African continent a major hindrance?
The visa
regime?
Oh, I would say so, but you see, Kenya has actually led the way. Kenya has opened its doors to anybody who wants to come here, and you cannot invest in a country you're not too sure you'll be allowed to visit another day. So I think it's a game changer for Kenya. I've met visitors and tourists from all over the world who want to come to Kenya, and you can decide that any minute come. So I think we want to make Kenya that place where if you have money, if you want to travel, if you want to visit, you can come here and there's no discrimination and nobody will stop you. And that has really impacted positively on our financial circumstances. All these dollars, dirhams and pounds that you see floating is as a result of that. And maybe just to mention, Nairobi's real estate, all these skyscrapers you're seeing, 50% of them are not by Kenyans. They're actually by foreigners. And that tells you that that one single directive of no visa for foreigners is a big driver for what we see, even in real estate, among other things.
Yeah. Okay. And talking about also the materials that go into that, we'll come shortly to the also affordable housing bit, the job employment, job creation rather, and also the materials. But the visa dovetails with also work permit for investors. Does also the class factor here set in, and the many hindrances people decry about immigration, for example, willing investors, but because of the bottlenecks at the immigration department, they rarely find it hard to penetrate the market. And without the permits, of course, you cannot be able to do business.
So Kenya may not be very keen to open its doors for anybody from all over the world to come and work in Kenya, because obviously we have unemployment issues. So I think that is a matter that needs to be regulated. But on skills that we may not have, skills that are deficient in Kenya and are needed for certain sectors, that would be a different issue. But also it will be good to remember that Kenya has been lauded for digitization, the e-citizen platform. Immigration you can feel from any part of the world, and you'll be able to download and all that. So we may not be exactly where we want to be, but in future, taking government services digital will allow us to be more accessible, more transparent, and it will also reduce the human transaction that is necessary. Meaning that you can be in Dubai and you can fill all your documents, get your go-ahead, and come over and pay actually online still. So Kenya leads in the digital space, and we also want to bring that to government. The e-citizen that you find in Kenya is actually being benchmarked by almost all the other African countries you can imagine. So the thing is, let's make it better, let's make it perfect, and again, working with CONSA, we're able to give the necessary support in terms of the small bottlenecks that may be there.
And when you talk all about that, how much stakeholder cooperation contributes to that lift-off and paradigm shift in one, leveraging on technology, for example, in your docket, and also the others, because we also have other economic challenges as well. We still borrow. We talked about Forex and need to balance our books financially. We're still borrowing. The deficit is high. We are not creating as much employment as possible, manufacturing to create that. So what is then the next frontier that we can turn on? Because all these challenges, even the one that faces your ministry, is all man-made by people within the establishment. So how do we, embark on that lift-off and paradigm shift?
Institutional resistance, anytime you want to bring a service online, be it government procurement, the EGP, I'm sure you've heard all the noise around it, and any other service, because what it does is to remove all this red tape and opportunity for other sort of businesses. So, but the greater good is what is important for our country, not necessarily that individuals may be aligned to it or otherwise. But I think having said that is to say that Kenya is a key player in the digital space. If you look at M-Pesa is no longer just a Kenyan product. Now they're in Ethiopia and East Africa, and anywhere across the world you can send your M-Pesa or receive. So again, we are leading in that space. So maybe the traditional perception of an industry must also change. Kenya is now a digital, superpower in the region.
Ecosystem.
Look at our financial space again. We going by M-Pesa and also going by our financial. A lot of the big companies within the region, even international organizations that want to come to the region, will have their banking done from Nairobi. Recently, you heard that the UN is relocating about 5,000 of its employees from New York to here in Nairobi. Why? It's because you have those services. So Kenya is not just growing in the traditional industry, but also in the service industry. And I think this is an area we need to appreciate, because this is, again, a big driver.
Yeah.
Whether you're thinking insurance, we have some of the biggest insurance companies in the world. They've actually come to Nairobi. Why? Because Nairobi now offers that platform, and government has created that enabling environment.
Yeah.
So we see a shift also from the traditional industry now to the more service-oriented kind of economy.
Yeah, and pointing that out, digitization is dovetailed by also the automation you talked about, delays in the clearance at entry points across the country, plagued by, one points out, of corruption, inconsistent rules, which particularly impact smaller traders. What's being done to overcome that challenge remains a major question. If you look at Tanzania, if you look at the border we share with Somalia, Uganda, and also what comes into the country through our airports.
I am working, the ministry is working together with players and development partners to try and make our borders seamless. So if you're going, say, to Uganda, you declare what you're carrying, pay whatever taxes that are due to be carried, and then digitally we'll be able to scan it, and you open and you're gone. Current situation, you have scanning on one side, then you cross, then it is scanned again. So we need to harmonize these areas. And I think I must say that especially Kenya and Uganda, there is a meeting of the mind around the need to make our borders seamless. Because if a truck takes 4 or 5 hours to be cleared, then it means that we're reducing productivity, making our goods more expensive, and therefore our region uncompetitive. So both technology, training, and also political goodwill is going to help us unlock. And also to realize that trade within African countries or intra-Africa is at 17%. In Europe is at 70%. So there is no way we are going to make crossing one border a nightmare and expect these numbers to change. So I think that opening of the mind, and to know that Kenya's solutions may well lie across the border. And Tanzania or Uganda or Rwanda, Burundi, the same. So that free flow of goods and people is really important and essential in creating the necessary wealth.
And one of the major issues that came out of the Arusha summit last year, when our president was or became the chairperson of Jumuiya, was the one currency. And talking about Europe, many factors make business within the European Union easy, includes one currency system. Ideally, how much are we there? What are the follow-ups and necessary steps that are being done within Jumuiya's setup, first, starting off here? Because 17% across the continent is paltry. It's a drop in the ocean.
I'm sure you're aware that we'll be having the summit where all the heads of states come to deliberate some of these things. But let me also say that the borders in Africa were created by the colonial powers. They themselves have seen that they don't need these borders. In Europe, moving from Germany to Netherlands to France, there's no border. You just cross with a train. You don't even get to know you've crossed. If you have a vehicle, nobody stops you. You just go. So if the people who created the borders in our continent don't see the value of those borders in their country, then we must realize we no longer need these borders. All we need is a system that allocates. If I'm supposed to pay 20,000 tax for this commodity, I should be able to pay that and cross without too much burden. But the point is, ease of trade and cross-border trade in particular in Africa is something we really need to internalize, because sometimes we've made it so difficult that we've ended up in one country, you have excess milk, we are throwing our milk, while another country is importing milk from Denmark and other countries. So really this shouldn't be happening. And I'm happy that the heads of state at that level are already addressing this old thinking that you can survive on your own and you can be rich as a country on your own without benefiting from the trade within ourselves.
And how much can Africa do within itself to lift up its economy? Because it's big, natural resources, labor, the continent is young, it's endowed with natural resources. Somalia has one of the longest coastlines in the world, 3,600 or 300 kilometers. Look at South Africa. I mean, What then can be done? What is much needed to give that impetus?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to note is the mineral resources in Africa. I think we probably know maybe 5% of what is beneath us.
Yeah.
So maybe 95 is unknown. In fact, even in Kenya, just 2 weeks ago, we discovered huge reserves of gold in western Kenya. But you also know in Ukambani we have coal, at the coast we also have coal. We have rare earth around part of the Taita areas and all those areas. So again, we need to invest in these areas because some of the necessary minerals for transition, to energy transition, the EV vehicles and all that, will be coming from the continent of Africa. And we need to be in the forefront, not just in mining, but also in value addition and ensuring that these minerals help our people. Good governance will obviously be important, so that the industries are set here. We do not export the raw materials in their raw form. Sometimes they're even exported without even knowing their true value. So again, if we're saying that the mineral resources are here, again, the youth. Africa is the youngest continent. Not only young, like for Kenya, educated, motivated, and ready to work. So these are critical inputs for any economic growth. So for me, I see Africa and Kenya, for that matter, being at that take-off stage. So we just need to appreciate that we need to look at life outside the box. And maybe not just outside the box, we need to dismantle the box. There should be no box. Because box means we have a reference point. That we have borders, we have this is how we do things, we don't do, you know. We must look at things in a different way if we are to move forward.
You know Dr. David Matsanga?
Yes.
He says, ask the minister, Waziri Leki Nyanjui, why should a Ugandan or Kenyan need a work permit within Jumuiya to open a business or run a personal account? Is this not a hindrance, an economic blunder?
Kenya does not believe in that. We are probably the most progressive in this space. We would want any person within the East African community who wants to work here. But of course, because we have unemployment here, we also cannot say, let's open all the doors to anybody who wants to come here. So there must be a bit of a mechanism and a balance. But I want to assure you the number of Rwandans and Ugandans I come across in Nairobi is testimony to the fact that Kenya is ready for that conversation. But we also want a reciprocation on the same.
On the other end?
Yes.
Those hindrances, appreciating, they do still exist.
Absolutely.
But what at the executive level, then what's being done? What are the interventions as we head to the heads of state summits for the East African community later in the year?
The need for people and goods to move across our borders without any hindrance becomes very important. And we do not want a situation where every time there's an election in one place, business goes down, we can't cross the border, we can't do all this. I think these are all emerging threats and issues that we all need to confront. And no one can claim to have all the answers. But I want to confirm that Kenya is ready to take the lead in making trade a conversation within the Jumuiya and also within the COMESA region. One of the hindrances that we really need to work on is the issue of infrastructure. If you want to take commodity from country A to country B, if you want to go to West Africa, for example, there's no direct route. If you want to go by ship, that ship will probably go to Dubai first, or India, or Singapore, before it can go to West Africa. What would maybe take 5-8 days will end up taking 30 to 45 days. So we need to invest in shipping lines for the continent. We need to develop infrastructure like railway. And that's why Kenya again becomes very important. From Mombasa up to the border with Uganda, you're aware that we are now connecting the railway. And now from Uganda it can go all the way up to the DRC. So those connections will open up. From Lamu all the way to the border with Ethiopia and Southern Sudan, there's only a small section which is already under construction. So again, in terms of the infrastructure, to allow the free movement of goods, Kenya is also taking that lead. So I think it's a multifaceted. There's a mindset, there's the infrastructure, there's the capital, there's the people, and obviously the opportunities that we need our people to take advantage of.
And that opening up, Waziri, when you are in China, one of the issues that President Xi premises the Chinese economy on is the Belt and Road Initiative.
Absolutely.
So how much then can Africa leverage on that, given its importance and how influential China has been on that front? And taking advantage of the technology that goes into that. Now the Chinese are opening up the global economy.
So one thing to note is that some of these economies, including China, have gone a bit down.
Yeah.
So they are looking more outwards. So they're looking for opportunities in Africa and other places. And one of the areas of opportunity for them is infrastructure. And so for that reason, they are very keen to co-invest in the railway, in roads, and that's why for Kenya, we are now saying, if you have resources and you want to partner with us on a PPP model to open our infrastructure so that trade can move. And, you know, we don't want to see roads as just roads. This is infrastructure for trade and business. Without roads, there can be no business. Without railway, we cannot be able to move. So Kenya is taking a lead, and I want to also thank the President for the bold move that we would want to double the number of roads in Kenya in the next 10 years. And for that to happen, we are now creating an infrastructure fund where we must look for people to invest, open the infrastructure, and once now the economy is running at that other level, we are able to now service our loans and our obligations in terms of moving forward.
Yeah.
But for us to move from where we are to the next level, we cannot go at the very same old, you know, sort of paces we've taken in the past.
Yeah, and appreciating Waziri, as we also finish up, is that one major hindrance across board that is eroding not only trade but also other spheres is corruption and pilferage of resources. How much then can be done first in the investor community, for the investor community to believe again that this hindrance is addressed from the government's perspective, because it is certainly a big bottleneck?
I think first, corruption is not just a government conversation. Even on individual to individual, this is a societal issue, because it would be wrong to ascribe it just to government, because it's a societal problem that we need to address. But having said that, I think digitization is the first point of call, because if for me to apply for my passport or for these permits, I apply, I upload my documents, I pay 1,000 on e-Citizen, and I get a response. For driving license, I want to renew my driving license, I go online, I pay, I get my... So when you remove the human interface, you bring corruption issues by half. But also a challenge to our anti-corruption agencies that not only should we hear them once in a blue moon, they need to be up and running, so that we can make Kenya not just competitive in terms of the other parameters, but also on the issue of corruption index, because that can really soil our name, and we know that has been the case. But I'm also keen to say that sometimes we allow certain vices to be just tagged, you know, with Africa or Kenya for that matter. But I think corruption is a global issue. Even in other countries, they're trying to deal with it. The only question we need to ask is, what measures are we doing to curtail? But corporate greed around the world is not new. People defeating the system, playing around with, those are not new issues. However, what can we as a state do? And I've said digitization is one of them, and through anti-corruption and other governance structures, we can be able to address some of those issues.
And we certainly punish less, is it, despite having the robust institutions and the legal framework?
Absolutely, and I think also religion has a role to play, because at the end of the day, you'll go to your mosque, I'll go to my church. Again, some of these things are about what you consider to be right or wrong. So there's also a part of it that goes to how we are brought up, how our bringing influences our choices, and so on. And you don't have to be poor to be corrupt. Even the rich sometimes are the most corrupt. So I think it's really a socio-moral issue, and we need to find a way of inculcating it from the very starting level in education and going all the way. It should be a way of life. And this is not a government issue. This is a societal problem.
Waziri, I'll give you a final word here on this special broadcast. This is your camera. First, to the investor community. Second, to Kenyans and ideally those willing to trade, of course, internally. And then finally, of course, the projection of the country as an investment hub.
Thank you. So first, I want to start with my fellow Kenyans and say that we have a great country. Sometimes you don't realize how great a country you are until you've been out of this space. And you realize the turbulence out there, the challenges out there. We have a great country. And it takes very little for Kenya to move from where we are to the next level. We are the envy of many nations across the world. So I think it's up to us now to come up together, to our leaders, government, church leaders, and everybody, and align our issues. I am happy to note that some of the issues that were raised by the young people last year, including governance, including corruption and all those issues, including largesse in government, a good number of them have been addressed. But I think we need to keep our eye on the ball and always be responsible to our citizens who have put us in these great offices. Secondly, for the international investors, I want to say that Kenya remains confident that the measures we have put, from stability, macroeconomic stability, to incentives like the special economic zone, creating a conducive political stability that is unheard of across the continent, we are able to provide a destination like no other. And we will continue to work. All the pledges we have given to investors across who have come to Kenya, we want to work on that. And to say also the area of PPP has also opened a new opportunity. So if it's you want to do a conference center in Kisumu for 10,000 people, you can partner with government, offer that service, get your return on investment, and the whole city also benefits. The same with Nakuru, Mombasa, and any other place. So we are looking at ways of doing things that previously were unthinkable. And we believe that this is the opportunity and the time is now. Thank you.
Waziri, much appreciated. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Asante sana for gracing the bench on the road this evening, this special broadcast. Many thanks.
Appreciate
Looking
it.
forward to more engagement
with
you. And many thanks for watching the broadcast. The bench was on the road this evening here at the Business Bay Square in Eastleigh, a suburb with immense economic contribution to the county of Nairobi and the country as well, as appreciated by Waziri here on the bench. Many thanks for your time and your feedback on the hashtag JK Live. I am Ayub Abdikadir. To the team that has made this production a success, also thanks to them. I'll see you tomorrow morning on daybreak, on a day when the President will be delivering the State of the Nation address in Parliament in the afternoon. As we look forward to that address, the head of state will be giving to the joint sitting of the bicameral Parliament tomorrow by the grace of God. We'll see you then on daybreak. Till then, good night and God bless our great country.